Start here.
Hey everyone and welcome.
Hey guys.
Yeah, we're going live here to show you the process of creating a new paradigm business model. We're just at the very beginning of this. I'm here with Paul Cooper and our handy tech friend Max Nashamkin, who is setting up our tech. We are broadcasting live in many places today, so you'll be able to get a recording of this as well. If you're not, well, I guess you could get the recording here, but a 360 YouTube recording. I'll be posting a link on that. And what Paul and I are going to be doing today is going over the Constitution for holacracy, the holacracy Constitution, as we start to look at what is a new paradigm business model that we can put together to relaunch a company that I closed down for all intents and purposes 2 years ago because I couldn't keep doing business the way I was doing it and be the leader of two companies at the same time in the traditional business model, because really the business model in many ways is broken. And well, we'll talk more about it as we get into the live stream. You're going to see us do a couple of more intros actually here, because I'm going to get started on my live page and we're going to get started in some of the other places. So y'all are here on my business page. Welcome. You might know me as Alexis Neely, also Ali Shanti. And if you're interested in new paradigm business models, you're in the right place. So I'm going to figure out how to put this up here, Paul.
I got it.
Okay, great. All right, so if you are interested, by the way, in new paradigm business models, why don't you just let me know that. I think that I'll be able to see you comment. Or maybe try letting me know that you're here by pressing the like button or something. See if it lets me know that there's people. I don't know, maybe in this format it doesn't let us know.
You got 13 people on there.
But I can't see them message things. Is that right? That's Paul's hand, by the way. Oh, great. Okay, great. Pretty scarf. Great. Cool. Thanks, Rebecca. Glad you like my scarf. Awesome. And I see somebody giving us a love button. All right, great. So we're going to go ahead and get this started on my personal page as well. And I've never done this before on my personal page, so let's see how this works. All right. Okay, so you're a little blown out there in the light, but creation, reviewing the holacracy Constitution. So that's what we're going to be doing here today. We're going to be reviewing the holacracy Constitution. I'm curious if anybody watching here so far has ever heard of holacracy or participated in holacracy. Let me know. All right, great. Hi everyone, this is Alexis Neely. You might know me as well as Ali Shanti. I'm here today with Paul Cooper, and we are focusing today on building out a new paradigm business model. And we're looking at the principles of holacracy. And holacracy is a way of organizing governance principles and also ownership of the business. Is that right, Paul?
Holacracy, from my understanding, doesn't deal directly with ownership. It's a governance structure that has to do with how power is allocated within the organization, so that power doesn't get overly centralized in one place.
Okay, great. So we're not going to be talking about ownership of the organization today. That will be for another conversation. We are talking with an organization called ENCODE about how to structure ownership of the organization. Today we're going to be talking about governance and power and control. And the reason that we're doing this is because I had a business called Eyes Wide Open Life, still do, for many years. And in 2014, And that business did $900,000 of revenue. But because of how I structured the control models within the organization, where I had partners, but they weren't really partners. And we had a team, but all of the team needed really a tremendous amount of hand-holding. And it was a very hierarchical structure, one we're, all very familiar with. And because of that structure and the way that the power dynamics were, ultimately the company fell apart. And I haven't been offering the programs that Eyes Wide Open has created now for about a year and a half, because ultimately I couldn't maintain the leadership paradigm that we had in place there. I have another company called New Law Business Model that I'm the CEO of, and it also has a fairly traditional hierarchical structure. And I couldn't run two hierarchical structures at the same time. I'm also, by the way, looking at restructuring New Law Business Model to make it into a what I call share the wealth company. But because it's already going and we're not going to undo it and start it all from the beginning, it really requires something different. But with Eyes Wide Open, I shut everything down for the most part about a year and a half ago. And I said, I'm not going to restart it until I can restart the company with a business model and a structure that is really sustainable. Sustainable not only for me as the owner of the company, but sustainable for everybody that participates in the company. Every team member, every client, everybody that the company reaches. And Paul and I have been in conversation about creating something around this for a long time. At the same time, he's been working on creating new paradigm structures for his own company and for the community that he's part of here in Boulder. And they've created a constitution for their new company. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And while that's been happening, I found somebody that I wanted to work with in Eyes Wide Open who got really excited about the Money Map, which is one of our primary programs over at Eyes Wide Open, and who wanted to invest in relaunching Eyes Wide Open. And I said, great, let's do that, but I'm not going to do it with a traditional hierarchical structure that ultimately leads to so many problems that makes it not sustainable. And some of those problems that I see as the founder is that everything ends up dependent on me. And I find it really hard to extract myself from the company and allow the company to continue to do its work in the world. As I go on and move on to do different things, or eventually I'm going to die, right? We're all dying. I'm dying right now, as are you, by the way. And so we have to create structures for our work in the world that are sustainable beyond our own evolution, beyond whether it's a death or beyond us wanting to go on and do something else. We're evolutionary creatures. We don't all want to, work at the same company for the next 50 years anymore and get the gold watch and retire. It's a different paradigm today. So it's ultimately not sustainable for the leader to build, these very traditional, in my opinion, structures, and then it's not really sustainable for the people who work for the company either, right? The way that I was taught to build companies in the traditional world is build a company that serves me, that where everybody working in the company is like in service to me. It's the way that we're taught to do it, and that just never felt right to me. I got there to the $1.5 million of revenue again and again, and I had a lot of freedom. And yet, here's all these people that are working with me, building the company, and they're trapped. They're trapped by their paychecks, or they're trapped by the fact that they can't take vacation, and they can't get sick, or things fall apart. And so this is just not right. We have to be able to do something else. And so I'm not interested in building a company that is all about serving me. I'm interested in building a company that is about serving us. And the us being everybody who participates in the growth of that company. By the way, including the customers and clients of the company as well. And so that's really what we're here exploring today. And you might be watching us here on my personal profile, my Shanti personal profile, or here on my Alexis Neely business page, or here.
Well, it's actually right
Oh,
here,
here?
on my personal page. Hi, everyone.
This is Paul Cooper, everyone, and Paul has been doing a lot of work in this area behind the scenes with his own community here and with a company that they're building from scratch. And you know, Paul, you like me, you could be a traditional leader.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like
I've
at
got
the
all
top
the
of the
qualities.
right, you've got all the qualities to be at the top of the pyramid, let's call it. But you want to do something different. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my experience has been an interesting one for a number of reasons, and if you're here on my page, you know that and understand that. And so, over the last few years, what I've come to is the conclusion I've come to is that something that humans lost somewhere along the way was the ability for groups of people to come together and pursue resources without necessarily having to agree into a power hierarchy, so like a control-based hierarchy. So right now there's not really options for people besides like either having a boss or being the boss. And so it kind of splits society into two distinctly different types of people, and it creates some challenges for sure for the leaders and for the people that would prefer to be supportive of someone that's in a leadership position. And so I wanted to create a way to also not have like money and the pursuit of resources damage the relationships with the people closest to me. So I wanted to figure out a way that even in the closest relationships in my life, money could be a part of that flow of energy, and we could pursue resources together, or give and exchange amongst ourselves like very easily with it, which is not traditional. Like there's not really good ways to do that.
Right. Yeah, and I saw that myself. Where repeatedly I would build these companies, and because I was the wage earner, there was all these power dynamics in my community that ultimately sucked for the people who were part of the, maybe who thought of themselves as subservient to me or in service to me because I was the wage earner, and maybe even in my mind I thought they're in service to me, which ends up being extremely lonely. And I think this is ultimately why I took everything apart back in 2009 to 2010 timeframe, because the burden of it was just too great. Ultimately, I felt so burdened. I felt so lonely. I felt like people really only wanted to be around me because I was the wage earner. I was bringing in the money. And that included my family. That included the people who worked with me. And it was really painful. And when I took everything apart and I went to live on my farm for a year and do nothing for money that I wouldn't do for free, it was a great year. I got to discover myself in that year. But what I also discovered in that year is that my role is to bring in the money. Like, I'm really good at that. I'm great at that. But that shouldn't make me better. Or the power dynamics that just got created through it just had to shift. But I didn't really know how to shift it. And one of the things that I teach in my Money Map program is that there's all these different entrepreneurial archetypes. And you might be a supporter archetype. And as a supporter archetype, that doesn't make you less than the creator archetype. Because honestly, the creator archetype can't do the creation without the supporters. And the connectors can't do their connecting without the creators to create the products. And so, and ultimately the supporters and the creators and the connectors all need the guides. And if we don't have everybody in the ecosystem with shared power, but also some form of hierarchy,
There has to be structure.
There has to be structure, right? I mean,
otherwise you can't get it back. You can't get close enough to other people to get anything done.
Yeah.
Consistently without structure, and that's what I'm finding out is like, so you can strip all the structure away, and I did this for like 5 years. I just like went in a completely fluid state, like not imposing like my preferences or anything, and just like being available to life, and you can achieve like a very open, like loving state that way. But you get close to other people, and then if there's no structure or no shared context within which that you're doing something, then you can't really get anything done in that closeness. And
right.
and so it stagnates pretty quickly
Yeah.
without structure.
Yeah, and ultimately, for those of you that are familiar with spiral dynamics or the Graves model, what we're talking about here is a shift from orange level of consciousness, where everything is about personal success and really power and control over other people, into the green level, green meme, which is, oh, we're all one, we're all equal, we're all the same. There shouldn't be any structure, there shouldn't be any hierarchy, which also doesn't work. Into integral level consciousness, where we transcend each of these levels of consciousness and include these levels of consciousness into a holistic consciousness that takes into account the reality that yes, there are power dynamics, and yes, there is hierarchy, and yes, we need boundaries and structures in order to be able to work together. But how do we do that in a way that really serves the whole, that really serves every single person who's part of the infrastructure, and not just the people at the top who know how to make the money and control the money? So do you agree that's what we're talking about here?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So we got a question here from Mark. Don't you believe that it's really about a new kind of leadership that fosters people playing in their genius zone? Absolutely, Mark. And it's about where every single person is a leader. Like, we've got to make the shift in our own consciousness to see that, like, just because I'm the leader doesn't mean that I get to control everybody and decide on their zone of genius for them or put them in their places. It's like there's got to be some way for emergence to happen where everybody that's part of the team is able to take 100% full ownership and personal responsibility for their part of what we are creating together. And that just because Mark, I know that you're like me and Paul, right? You're a creator, and that can oftentimes create this like consciousness where we're telling people what their zone of genius is or something. We're creating the infrastructure. We're creating the organizational chart and putting people in their places and then telling them what they need to do in order for the company to be successful. And that has to shift. That's exactly what I'm inviting here, with us shifting into something different. For myself, and I'm getting that there's a lot of shifts in my own internal consciousness that have to be made for us to be able to step into this new paradigm together. Because I've got some control mechanisms that are built in here that are oriented around success and orange meme and the hierarchy of skills that really need to be untangled. And so part of what we're going to be doing today is looking at the Holacracy Constitution. And then we're going to be also looking at a constitution that Paul created that I could see on the screen here is called the Light Leadership Constitution. And these constitutions are, so I'm just going to read from the preamble here that Paul wrote. I'm assuming with others.
This, this Constitution is loosely based on my study of the Holacracy Constitution, because I definitely don't have like the skill set to construct an article that is structured this way and like this concise. But when I read the Holacracy Constitution, I saw a lot of beauty in it, and I saw the opportunity in the structure of the document that they created to change it and use the document, change a lot of the terms. So it's been modified heavily and I used the structure of their document in order to create our constitution that articulates a distinctly different way of operating in a context within which the people are working, but the documents are similar, and so that's why I thought this would be a cool opportunity to go through them side by side, because you're considering taking on Holacracy potentially, or something similar, or even coming up with something proprietary. So if we just go over them and kind of pick them apart, and a lot of it will have my perspective in it, because I'll be sharing how I interpret these documents with Allie, and she'll be doing the same as we go through them.
Yeah, and so ultimately what we're doing here, the context for this is that as I relaunch Eyes Wide Open, and it's not I, it's we, as we, some group of people come together to relaunch Eyes Wide Open, it needs a constitution, it needs a founding document. And we are looking at hiring a company called Encode to possibly work with us on that. With the legal, with the structuring, and then we'll hire a lawyer to document everything legally. But at the basis, at the foundation of all of that is a constitution, a founding document for the organization. And so that's what we're looking at today. The Holacracy Constitution, which you can pull up on your own computer at any time, as well as the just now being created Light Leadership Constitution that Paul has created. And before we get started with that, I just want to say one more thing, which is that I've been exploring some other business models, including network marketing, and I see many of my leaders in the network marketing business that I'm involved in here. Eileen, welcome. It's great to see you here, and Michelle, great to see you here. And the reason that I've been exploring network marketing as a business model to get involved in, both to be involved in as a leader in network marketing, but also I potentially want to leverage that business model to support the work that I've created in the world, and to support more people to use that work and to share that work and to benefit from that work. And so I really love the network marketing model, and I can see there's still something beyond it, and I'm hoping that we get to create that together. So for those of you that are looking for the Constitution that we're going over, you can look at the Holacracy Constitution at holacracy.org/constitution. That's HOLACRACY.org/constitution. And you can't see the Light Leadership Constitution just yet. That is Paul's creation, and we're going to drop a link in the chat here on all the different streams that we're on, where you can opt in to a page where we're going to be releasing a lot more of what we're doing here. So if we are sharing, if Paul decides to share the Constitution, it will be shared with the people who are on that email list.
And we will at some point.
Okay, great. So we're going to drop that link in, and maybe I can even drop it in now. And hi, Annie. Hi, Anthony. Hey, Matthias. So good to see some of you here. I love that y'all are interested in this. Kelly, great to see you. And Bree, so happy that y'all are interested in this. And Dana, yes, we are all dying. And I think somebody else shared, Bree, yes, I'm living. Yes, we're all living. And we're living on our way to death. Nothing to be afraid of there. All right, so let me get this link for you guys. For some reason, I can't get it. Okay, here it is. And then we're going to dive in. So here's the link in the... great. And did you post it on yours as well?
I didn't post it on my...
Okay.
On my thread.
Okay, you can post it on your thread. Awesome, Matthias. Love that you're watching from Morocco after just having finished the Open Innovation Final. That's fantastic. So I'd also love to hear from any of you who have experimented with new paradigm business models, distributed leadership models, where everybody is taking 100% full responsibility for their experience, and also where people are rewarded in new and innovative ways. So please do share about your experiences here as well. Okay, great. And Eileen, I love that you're saying that the network marketing model, it's entirely spiritual growth with direct results. Well, I find that business in general is entirely spiritual growth with direct results, but so many times the people that are actually building the company, the supporters and the people working behind the scenes, they're not having that experience. They're getting a paycheck. And that's not spiritual growth with direct results. So I want everybody to be able to have that kind of experience as well. All right, so let's dive in.
Awesome. So before we dive into the Constitution, I just want to kind of like help people have an understanding of the layers of a business. So there's the business agreement itself, the legal document that is, associated with the registration at the state. And that just says you are a business, and it gives you whatever benefits that whatever entity you used has.
Yeah.
Some of them have more room to define the specifics of what happens inside of that than others. And then,
So I'll just say a little bit more about that, right? So that's going to be your articles of incorporation. And that's going to be, if you're, or your articles of organization. Articles of incorporation if you're a corporation, which isn't super flexible. Articles of organization if you are an LLC, limited liability company, which is extremely flexible. So I would imagine that all of these structures that we're talking about are going to be built probably on top of an LLC type structure.
in most cases, I would think so, and that's because of the flexibility that's available.
Yeah.
But then it does, because there's so much flexibility, it requires some creativity on like what do you want, what definitions do you want to put in there.
Totally.
You're not adopting just some government construct wholesale, which is exciting and a little bit daunting because it means there's a lot of decisions to make.
Yeah.
All that being said, neither one of the things that we're going through today are that.
Right.
So those things would be something that you would set up, and then within that setup, a company that is going to be able to scale and grow like naturally on its own needs a set of rules, like a way of operating, like a manual for how things happen, and with structure and organization in it that is not inside of one person's head. And so hence the document the document on paper, like a constitution. And so I think that's a big step.
Yeah.
Because it's easy for somebody who is self-directed and passionate and capable to kind of just charge off and do the work of 3, 4, 5 people for a little while and single-handedly get something off the ground. But then they have to get support. There's like a whole bunch of things that they need to get for it to get beyond that. And that process can be very difficult to undertake if you wait too long. So there's a lot of variables. And this piece, the beautiful part about this is as like some of the people that have been really working on these like really intricate problems for a long time, as like they're coming together more and more, soon we'll get to a place where there's something that is like demonstrably working out in the world, and then people can just like, it can start to fractal out and get open sourced and passed around, and then the creation process of it, the difficult part of like figuring out the intricacies and like going through all the relational challenges that it takes to like figure out a new system, like we can, that part will start to we'll move past that into a more exploratory, like expansive phase of the new paradigm, but it's still very much like a bumpy kind of like grinding process that different people in different communities are really working on. I know Jordan Greenhall and Memento Mori are really doing some really amazing work with cryptocurrency and the DAO and
It's going to be very exciting.
It's really cool stuff, and they've got so there's like all these little communities that are masterminding around similar things, but today's conversation is a side-by-side comparison of two constitutions, and so basically two potential constructs for the operations to happen inside the company and for growth to happen and all of that.
Great. And Matthias is asking, is this really just clarifying the values and culture for the organization, or is this something different?
No, it's more intricate than clarifying the values and culture, because it like very neatly defines kind of like how control is distributed and how power is allocated inside of the organization, because in the absence of like explicitly allocating the power and the control, it pools on people that are able to hold it, and oftentimes it's like so many people are just willing to just like give their power away to a leader and not take responsibility. And so without a construct that decentralizes the power in a meritocratic, like sustainable way, but does it explicitly, then it pools on people and it creates imbalances in the organization.
Right. And well, the way that, what John David is saying here, my experience is that in the beginning, it is easier to do it all myself. As the business grows, it can be tricky to know and allow to move some of that responsibility to others. Well, and that's the classic founder's dilemma.
Right.
It's always easier in many ways to do it myself, but alone I hit up against ceilings of impact and income. And then it all is stuck on me doing it myself. And then when I try to delegate what I've been doing myself, usually I haven't been taught to delegate or to lead in a way that actually inspires other people. And so I have to use reward mechanisms like money to get people inspired, but those are not ultimately sustainable reward mechanisms, because as we are starting to see, people aren't so motivated by money anymore. Like it's pretty hard actually to find people who are really great people who are willing to work for just money.
I mean, there's studies out there that prove consistently that as soon as you move a person out of basically repetitive mechanical labor, like you can give them more money and make them work faster to do the repetitive task, like, and they'll do that sustainably up to the point where they have like a roof over their head and food. But as soon as you ask them to do anything creative, the more you pay them, the less creative they're able to be, and the faster it falls off. So like they're like, as a founder, even if you are well resourced, but you just need support, the thing that you need the most, you can't pay for is the problem.
No.
Like you can't pay for it, no matter how much money you've got, and the harder you try and push or squeeze to get it out of someone, the farther away from you they're gonna go. So you're not gonna get, like, you can't force it, which is the problem, because like once you get to the point where you've done it all yourself and you really need the support, like it's hard not to force it.
Yeah, and I mean that's ultimately what I'm running into at New Law Business Model. I talked with a friend of mine just recently, and we're going to do about $2.5 million this year probably. And I spoke to this friend of mine because I really want to incentivize the lawyers that we train to want to mentor junior lawyers that are coming in. Because I noticed that that's where I'm stuck. I can build my company huge, I can bring in tons of lawyers, but if I don't have enough senior lawyers who are trained in my methodologies to mentor these junior lawyers, I've hit a ceiling, I've hit a wall. I can't go any farther because we just can't train enough of them. Or I have to be the one to train them for the rest of my life, and that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to write books, and I want to create new things in the world, and so I hit up against this ceiling, and I can't motivate these lawyers to train junior lawyers with money. They've got $1 million businesses themselves. I've taught them how to do that. So I talked to this friend of mine who's also in my industry, and he said, all right, Alexis, you've made a lot of people rich over the years. It's time for you to get rich now. He said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to hang in there 2 to 3 years, and I want you to focus on getting this company to $3 million with gross margins of 20%. And I want you to cut everywhere that you can, so you're just focused on the gross margin, so that you're bringing in $600,000 a year of gross margin. And then let's talk again, and then you could sell the business. And it's just like, I can't do it.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I just can't do it. It's not in alignment for me. Instead, I want to find a way to actually incentivize. By the way, I know that if I did that and then I sold the business would fail, likely at that point. That's not what's going to keep the legacy of this business going and the legacy of the work that I'm creating going. He's like, yeah, I know you've got a mission, but you got to focus on money. You got to get, it's time for you to get rich. And I just don't look at the world that way. That's not what motivates me. So what am I going to do? Yeah, I am already rich, John David. Certainly, I feel rich. Now, can I fly a private jet to, to Ibiza right now? That's kind of what I consider rich. No, I can't. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not rich from some people's perspectives, but I have, I feel very, very rich in so many ways. And I don't prioritize money as making me rich. Certainly not hoarding money, certainly not focusing on the gross margins so that I can cut everything, so that I can sell the company and then watch it fail. No, we have to figure out something else, you guys. So.
Well, and the idea of like bringing up a company and the people that it supports, right? They're a community, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so and they rely on each other. It's more than just a set of pieces. So the idea, the notion of having your community live under the threat of cut, I need, just that alone, as soon as it's hard to hold in your body, the idea of putting people through that for one, and then you can imagine what it would do to, whatever culture is there already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just not sustainable. Money is, once again, in my experience, and Paul is validating this, once we've got our basic needs met and we've gotten beyond money dysmorphia, which tells us that that it's never enough, and that's a concept that I've discovered that basically says it's never going to be enough and causes us to make poor decisions about how we use our time, energy, and attention in service to money, because it's never going to be enough. Once we've gotten past our money dysmorphia and we realize that we can actually always have enough by being clear on what we need, and what we have to give, and knowing how to ask for what we need in exchange for what we have to give, money no longer is the motivator. Money isn't the motivator. And if you are still motivated by money, then it's totally fine. You just might want to look at what's underneath that, really. There might be something under there that you're not looking at, because you might find that you get all the money you thought you needed and find that you're not fulfilled there. It wasn't actually what you wanted. So I think we want connection. I think we want community. I think we want creativity. That's what I think most of us are probably ultimately motivated by.
Yeah.
Okay,
so let's dive in.
Constitution. All right, so we're going over these constitutions, and as I said, it's the Holacracy Constitution and the Light Leadership Constitution, you got me curious, Rylas, what it means that you've never met a rich person. I feel curious about that.
That question piqued my curiosity as well.
Yeah. What's it mean, Rylas, that you never met a rich person? We need to get you hanging out with some other people. Because I know a lot of rich people, really, really rich people. Some of them barely have any money at all. They got a lot of wealth. Okay, so in both of these constitutions, there's the preamble that just says what it is.
So I'll just start reading through the Holacracy, and we can just go through it and discuss, and then
Right.
we'll go through the next one. So the preamble for Holacracy says, "This Constitution defines rules and processes for the governance and operations of an organization. The ratifiers are adopting these rules as the formal authority structure for the organization specified upon the Constitution's adoption, which may be an entire entity or part of one that the ratifiers have authority to govern and run. The ratifiers, and anyone else who agrees to take part in the governance and operations of the organization, its partners, may rely upon the authorities granted by this Constitution, and also agree to be bound by its duties and constraints."
Great. Now that's the same as we have in the Light Leadership Constitution, with one interesting difference. You are calling it an organism.
Organism, yeah.
Instead of an organization, and you are calling the people who are participating, the ratifiers and anyone else who agrees to take part in the governance and operations, members instead of partners. And so I'm curious, what had you want it to be an organism instead of an organization? I like it because it feels alive. It feels
Right,
really
and
alive.
that's exactly what I wanted to get across. So organism, like it goes into like biomimicry, and if you think about even the way that sacred geometry mirrors like cell division. So I wanted the organism, the like emergent entity that is the cooperative of people. I wanted it to have all of the qualities of a living organism. So I wanted it to, and it to grow kind of like an organism grows, like the cells divide and so forth. And you'll see that as it comes through in the
I love
language
that.
that we use. And so organization felt more like a watch that like was very organized, and so it's like an organization of cogs, and like you can make it really beautiful and it can do amazing things.
Yeah,
But that's more what the word organization felt like to me.
right.
And organism still has like a lot of like elegantly ordered complexity, and you know like
It's
it accomplishes amazing things, but it is living,
Yeah.
and it does need to be kept alive. It's not something you can just like just put away and then
Yeah.
not pay any attention to, and it's not gonna stay there like a watch.
Right. Okay. So we've got a living organism here at the foundation of this this business model in the Light Leadership Constitution. Now, the next thing that Holacracy does is it defines roles. It kind of starts with Article 1, energizing roles. You are not starting with roles. You're starting with a sphere structure. And I know that Holacracy is built on roles, where people
Yes.
have roles and those roles are defined in
Yes.
some way. But you've got a sphere structure, so talk to us about that.
Got it. So with Holacracy, the roles essentially are the replacement term for a job in a regular organization. So, but people, when they use the term job, it feels constraining and it feels like it's associated with who they are. And so the logic behind the term role is we're going to use a role, and then people can pick up the role and use it and then put it down.
Like do the role.
Or act through the role is the languaging they use. So you like, when you're at work, you're acting through the role for the organization. And so the reason I just started my document with the structure is because I wanted people to understand the context within which that we're operating, instead of like starting with the role. So if I was going to start with that, the term that we use instead of a role is a perspective lens. So for our purposes,
So instead of a role,
uh-huh.
you have a perspective lens. So each person who normally might have a role or a job in a traditional structure here has a perspective. In the Light Leadership structure that Paul's creating has a perspective lens, which I actually really love, because that's what's true.
Right.
Right? We all have a lens that we're looking through.
Well, the assumption for us is that that everybody is going to show up with their own perspective. Like, period. And we can't take that away from them. We can't pretend they don't. But whether or not that perspective is relevant to the shared goals of the organism,
Yeah.
it is determined on like the lens that they're holding in reference to the organization. So they act through their perspective lens.
Got it.
So as they shine their unique perspective through the lens like bends the light, so to speak, so that the light is supportive to the organization or the organism.
Super fascinating. I'm so curious, some of you are hanging in here for this part, not all of you. You guys are the real, those of you that are still with us are the real, I think, kind of diehard new paradigm business model people. So I'm curious how this is landing for you, the idea of instead of there being roles, there's a perspective lens. And can you describe, so what is the sphere that's holding, or the sphere is made up of perspective lenses. What is the sphere?
Got it. So the sphere is the unit structure that we use. So a regular company would have like a team.
Okay.
Holacracy has circles,
Uh-huh.
and we're calling it a sphere.
Okay. So there's a sphere.
So the sphere is like any group of, like the group of people. The company is a sphere. It starts as a sphere, and then the sphere can, like, once the perspective lenses expand enough, then they can break down into spheres and it can keep rectaling out.
Got it.
So the sphere structure is essentially just a sphere is the emergent container within which the structure of the organism is formed. So the structure is made up of perspective lenses. Spheres are emergent to new organization is formed, or a new organism is formed, or when a perspective lens expands. So one person would have a perspective lens, but as the company grows, that perspective lens might need more hands on deck, right? And so once that perspective lens gets up to 4 people on it, then it would break down into, then it would like become the seat of a subsphere.
Okay.
In the organization. So then it would break off into a group that would get more support, and each person would become more specialized.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so, and I think, John David, that this is addressing what you were saying about it's just easier to do things by myself, but then ultimately I hit up against this edge. And so I think what you're saying is that when there's 4 perspective lenses come together within a sphere,
You have a sphere.
you've got a sphere.
Yeah.
And then those 4 can break off into a subsphere that has certain objectives, I would guess.
So I've got like whole, like,
He's got toys.
I got toys that I made. So so this is essentially the structure of the business.
Okay.
So, but how do you get to this, right? So the idea is if you have like a person and they're doing it by themselves, you go do it by yourself, and eventually you've created a little one-man pyramid, because the idea that you're working toward, it has priorities, it's got all of these things, it's got stuff you have to do regularly, it's got like plans you have to make, like you're doing all of it. So it's a little pyramid. But eventually you're going to need support. And so you'll get more people to come in. So the pyramid's got 3 sides, and you bring in 3 people. So you got points here. So then all of a sudden you've got 4 perspective lenses now. But you're still like flat, and so those 4 perspective lenses, if you pop them and push them together, then you have this guy.
Okay.
And so that would be half of this.
Okay.
And so, but that is like the basics of it. This would be the basics of a sphere.
Okay.
And
Got
so
it.
pretty much like 4 people could get, like 4 people who are related in an equal way to each other, because this is a platonic solid, so each one of these sides is exactly the same size, and the distance between the points is exactly the same. And so each person is equally related to all of the other people, although there's structure.
Right.
And so at this stage, then you would bring in like more support, and so essentially you would bring in a 4th person. So
Okay.
now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. Or you'd have 4. You bring in a 5th person, and then you bring in a 6th person, and then you bring in a 7th person, and you're here.
Okay.
And then you need the business structure that you legally anchor it at that point, and then this whole thing can be built out of these. And so each person has a perspective lens.
Got it.
And then they have, like, based on where they're oriented in the company. So this is the structure of the business.
This is the ultimate structure.
This is that's what you create with your group of people. And You can do it with 3 people, you can do it with 5 people, however many people, but essentially you're building it out of these
Perspective lenses.
perspective lenses. And so as the perspective lenses are articulated, related to each other around the shared goal, and the people are shining through it, then this can blossom.
Got it.
And so the way that this is, like, the way to understand this kind of is to build it in reality with people.
Yeah.
It would essentially look like this. And the people you'd have the people coming through.
So Jake is asking, this sounds more theoretical than practical. No. He's saying no. So how do we put practical, like, getting things done models, right? Business needs to get
Right.
things done around these perspective lenses.
Got it. So
And maybe we need to scroll through to the next part of the Constitution. Like, does the
yeah,
Constitution address that?
Yeah, the Constitution will address it. So I want to get into the definition of a role and all of this stuff because I want to address the holacracy thing, and then
Okay.
as we get through this, then we'll be able to like make more sense of
Okay.
the next one. So the definition of a role: organizations' partners will typically perform work in the organization by acting in an explicitly defined role. A role is an organizational construct with a descriptive name and one or more of the following: a purpose, a domain, or accountability. And a purpose is, and it only has to have one, it doesn't have to have all 3. So a purpose is a capacity, potential, or unrealizable goal that the role will pursue or express on behalf of the organization. A domain are the things that the role may exclusively control or regulate as its property on behalf of the organization. And accountabilities are ongoing activities of the organization that they'll perform. So if you have responsibility, so responsibilities associated with filling a role. As a partner of the organization, you have the following responsibilities for each role that you are assigned to and agree to fill. You're responsible for monitoring how your role's purpose and accountability are expressed, and comparing that to your vision of the ideal potential expression to identify gaps between the current reality and the potential you sense. Each gap is a tension. So, and you are responsible for trying to resolve those tensions by using the authorities and other mechanisms available to you under this Constitution. And then processing of purpose and accountabilities. You're responsible for regularly considering how to enact your role's purpose and each of your role's accountabilities by defining next actions and projects. Processing projects, you're responsible for regularly considering how to complete each project you are actively working towards for your role, including by defining any next actions useful to move the project forward. Tracking projects and next actions, you're responsible for capturing and tracking all projects and next actions for your role in a database or similar tangible form, and for regularly reviewing and updating that database to maintain it as a trusted list of the roles, activities, and potential work. You are also responsible for tracking any tensions you identify for your role, at least until you process them into desired projects, next actions, or otherwise resolve them. And then directing attention and resources. Whenever you have the time available to act in your role, you are responsible for considering the potential next actions you could efficiently and effectively do at that point in time, and executing whichever you believe would be or would add the most value to the organization from among the subset. So it's basically giving you the authority to like set your own priorities. Then it has a clause called authority to act, or as a partner assigned to a role, you have the authority to execute any next actions you reasonably believe are useful for enacting your role's purpose and accountabilities. However, you cannot exert control or cause a material impact within a domain owned by another role or another sovereign entity, unless you have their permission. The authority granted in this paragraph is further limited by section 2.213.
So I like what I'm reading here. What did you not like about it that had you shift away from the idea of roles into perspective lenses?
well, as we get a little bit farther, so far I love it.
You do. Okay.
But as we get a little bit farther, we see that it doesn't really resolve the top-down thing because it's still the lead link, like assigning all of the roles and like delegating the tasks in the roles and doing all the things, and then the lead link, yeah, basically is still the boss, but they don't get to act like the boss.
So they're the boss, but they don't have the authority of the boss?
Right.
Okay.
But it's still top down and centralized. It's just very gentle, like, so it's like jeweled movements, like it's beautifully elegant the way that it's done.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have to have a person at the top, like, moving it and being and controlling it essentially, but without telling anyone what to do. Like, you have to like invite them into taking action instead of, even if they've been sitting around for like a month not doing anything, you have to like schedule a meeting and then wait and then invite them into their role and then wait.
So it felt too slow.
And that's like a lot of the feedback you get from people that have actually adopted it, is like a lot of times, like if you, a lot of things just kind of get left open and you can't get to any resolution with it.
Got it. So maybe we could skip to how you address that in your constitution.
Got it. So in ours we have an accountability structure that we set up, because there's no way to, like, in this one there's no way to fire anybody or like get them out of their role if they're not being functional.
Got it.
Which is a huge problem as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know how people like will like stay in a community just because they're emotionally dependent on it without, you know what I mean? And like somebody could totally cripple the organism.
Yeah.
Still.
Okay, so how do we address that?
So we put in a 3-point accountability structure for everybody in our organism.
Okay.
And so essentially, your person here is going to have 3 people in the organization that is like a coach, like a guide, and and an accountability person. So they have.
So each person has that.
Each person has that.
Each perspective lens, is that
Yes.
representative of a person?
Yes.
Okay. So each perspective lens has a coach,
Yes.
a guide, and an accountability
somebody
person.
that they're accountable, and somebody that will like, that they can give a list of things they want to be held accountable to, and every day or every week or however often that person will like actually ask them, like, did you do it?
What's different between the coach and the guide?
The coach can like has more room to kind of like lean on them and like motivate them forward, where the guide is more a neutral person that they could come to with like wins and losses and like philosophical questions kind of thing.
Got it. And does everybody that's part of the organism play these roles for each other?
Yes.
Got it. So like I might be one person's coach, another person's guide, and another person's accountability person.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then I would have a coach, a guide, an accountability person who could be, there are going to be different things for different people.
Yeah.
How does all that get organized?
Like, just like person by person as they come in, it's like, because the way that people would come into a decentralized thing like this, it's not like they just like walk in and apply, because like, what are you applying for? Ownership? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So you kind of like, as the people come in, it would be case by case, essentially, like who's available, like to be their coach, or who is the person that they're most connected to that bringing them in, and maybe that person can be their guide because there's already a bond there. You know what I mean? And then there would be a way to, like, if you're not vibing with one person, then you could like submit for a change or something. So
Hey, this is really you can see I'm yawning. This is like not easy work. In my opinion, this is like, I find it to be mentally taxing, but really important, critical work in the structuring of how are we going to live, work, and oh no, we lost our connectivity. but not up there. We didn't.
No,
But
we're
here.
good up there.
Okay. Oh, we're back.
We're good.
Okay, great. So, it's like, how are we going to live, work, and love in community with the structures in place to hold us? And, like Paul was saying, one person can take an organism down if they come in and say they're going to do stuff and then they don't do it. So let's say that somebody comes into the organism, they say they're going to do stuff, they've got their perspective lens, they've got their coach guide and accountability, and then they don't do anything.
Got it. So this is, and we're assuming basically part of the premise is is that there's going to be part ownership involved, right? And potentially.
Well, yeah.
And that
I mean,
needs to be an option, right? So everyone the idea is that like all the people that are the most invested are also actually monetarily invested. It's not like they're just like invested with their heart and their energy while the other person's monetarily. Everybody's invested, like they have ownership in stock. So you can't just fire somebody that it's an owner, right?
Yeah, so in the ENCODE paradigm, they call everybody an investor.
Right.
Everybody's an investor, whether you put in time, capital, intellectual property, everybody is an investor, and they have a structure for identifying how much equity does everybody get towards their ownership.
Right.
Now, your model, I think, might be a bit different than that, but I don't even know if that's addressed in the Constitution.
That's not addressed at all in the Constitution. Now, we do have something similar in mind for the documentation for the LLC that we're drawing up and all of that stuff. So we do have stuff in mind for that. But the way that we handled it is that the 3 accountability people can always fire you. They can fire you from your perspective lens. It doesn't take you out of ownership. It doesn't take you out of, but it does disconnect you from the authority that you had over that lens. And then what that does is it instigates a process. So if your guide fires you and you think that the guide's just full of shit, then you can go you can appeal it with either the coach or the accountability person. If you've got a good relationship with them, maybe all that needs to happen is they need to talk to the guide and you guys all work it out. And so, but then some people might be like, oh God, like I didn't know how to leave. And like finally someone just like fired me from my lens and I'm just not going to talk to them anymore. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Like we want that to be able to happen.
We want people to be able to leave.
We want to make it
easily.
It needs to be easy for them to go. So either any of these people can fire the perspective lens. You can fire your own perspective lens too. And so what that does is firing the lens means that the lens goes from being malleable, where it's yours to like modify, to like now it's solid and belongs to the organism, and the organism can either bring someone in to pick up where you left off, or find somebody else in the organization or inside the ecosystem that wants to fill that perspective lens. Because the idea is that as the organism is like moving through time and space, it's like growing and evolving and moving, and so are all the people around it. But if the people don't stay oriented just right to their lens, like maybe they're not even like their lens is like that they got assigned over here, like they're not even pointed like or near it. So, and if they don't know how to let go of it because they're too invested, then if someone they trust is right there and hey, we're gonna fire you from your lens, it doesn't mean that you're like getting fired from the company. It doesn't mean that your pay quits right away, but it means that it could be enough of a break from like whatever like ties there are to that thing that either oh man, thanks, like I get what you're saying, like let's get back to it, or maybe you go to a different perspective lens that needs to be filled or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's one of the things that it's addressing is people's fear of loss of their job. And I notice that a lot in my companies, that even when people have no reason to fear losing their job, they still do. It's like some sort of built-in thing that I think a lot of us have, is we've got these fears of somebody's going to take something away from us that we really care about. And what I hear you saying is that with this structure, even if you have you're fired from your perspective lens, you aren't kicked out of the company or the
Right.
organism.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. You can leave if you want.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you leave and you're invested, there's a way that you can go non-participating
Right.
and then just collect a small payout based on like your level of investment. And so like there's a way that you can leave easily.
Right.
But there's also ways that you can like fight for your place if you don't feel like it was like, the right thing. And it's not a situation where like everybody has equal authority all the way across the board, and then you have to worry about like every person in the company like maybe taking up issue and like wanting to fire you. It's like, no, like the 3 people that like you're like working with the most, like
Mm-hmm.
they can do it,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody else can.
Who sets in your constitution, and then maybe it's not even addressed in the constitution, but who sets the priorities of the organization or the organism?
The way we have it set up is like the first time they're defined explicitly is by the first 3 invested members. Like aside from the basically the person who took first action, like the leader who initiates, like I want to start a thing and this is its purpose, but I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And so then 3 people come in. That person needs to like get the idea out of their head enough that these people are like invested and they're like wanting to marry this idea and like be in it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Otherwise, like an idea that's ready to be born isn't looking for like to hook up for a week or 2 with like people. It needs like
Commitment.
it needs commitment, and so like that person needs to get that idea out sufficiently to those people that they're like invested, committed, and whatever, and then they're the ones who like like set the priorities and like distribute it. Meanwhile, like it's just natural that that person that kind of initiated it is going to be doing all the things that they still don't see. So they have a less explicit role still, but that it starts getting defined by those 3 people.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So 3 people come together, they basically create that.
Right.
And then they can invite other people in who will also become part of this.
Yes.
Not as necessarily paid employees, but as...
No, they could still come in and start like working toward an investment. This doesn't even need to be like monetized yet. It could be,
Mm-hmm.
but like you could still bring people in and they could be like working for their investment and just committing to it and whatever. And then like, at the point that it monetizes, then everybody would start.
That's the
getting paid.
same as Encode.
Yeah.
That's the same as Encode. So I'm curious, for those of you that are still with us here, what questions arise for you around this? Jake, I saw that you said it sounds more theoretical than practical. I would say, Paul's organism is operating, right? You guys are actually applying this.
Yeah, I mean, our articulation of it is the best we could do as we've observed it happening like amongst ourselves. So myself and my team are basically, a few years into, or a year and a half into, a pretty intense like social experiment that we've been, conducting amongst ourselves on like how to work together and how to be in the world together and how to share space and
How to allocate resources.
And how to allocate resources collectively and individually within that and all of that.
And would you say that this Constitution is the documentation of that social experiment?
Yeah, it's right now, like I feel like this Constitution would be like if someone took the time to learn it like from us or just study it and understood it, it would give them the necessary information to follow a progression, a defined progression toward the way that we are operating now.
Got it.
So it's basically like our idea, because it's not exactly the path we took, but it has like some of the bridges that we built across the valleys we fell into, built into it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's shortcuts.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's still going to be hard work relationally to like get people, because there's a lot of conditioning that you have to kind of get through for everybody to like be operating in like a kind of simultaneously like so surrendered, but also like so like taking as much responsibility individually.
Okay, so I think what we should do, because I honestly don't think that we could sit here and go over it line by line and get through it.
Okay, you want to get? Should we?
I might die.
We could let this be the start of a dialogue, though.
I think
and
it
just,
needs to be the start of a dialogue.
and
I
just
think
like see what people got from where we are so far, like what their questions are, and like if we could get see where you guys are getting hung up on what we're explaining, and then we could maybe continue.
well, and I think what I need to do
Conversation.
is read the Light Leadership Constitution on my own,
Okay, cool.
and read the Holacracy Constitution on my own, and then get a understanding of where there's difference, and then come to you with questions and say, okay. I get what's different here. Let's
That'd be
see
awesome.
how those match up, because I think
Okay.
going through it together line by line
Sure.
is going to be too slow.
It's gonna be laborious, yeah.
And then I think also what we might want to do is so the reason that we're doing this is because we are looking at what are we going to use for Eyes Wide Open as we reconstitute Eyes Wide Open on a new paradigm business model. What is our constitution going to be? How are we going to address the power dynamics? How are we going to address the control dynamics that are going to be inherent in the reconstitution of this organization? And what are the shifts in consciousness that we're going to need to make along the way? And I know they're big, and I know it's going to take longer than if we just said, okay, the people who have the money make all the decisions, and we're going to hire all the people who don't have as much money, and we're going to pay them as little as we possibly can to get as much work done as we possibly can, which is the traditional model.
Right. And we don't care how they feel about it.
Yeah, we don't. Well, as
But
long as
we'll
they're
pretend
doing
we
it,
will.
yeah, we'll pretend that we care. But as long as the work's getting
Yeah,
done,
don't stop working.
yeah, just keep as long as you keep working. And so we're looking at creating something different, and we're at the very, 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 very beginning of this process. And so, for those of you that hung in there, I'm curious. For those of you that are still here, could you let me know what is it that you most want to experience for yourself? Like, what has you still here? We've been on now for over an hour. We've gotten into some really detailed,
I want to
nitty-gritty
give the people some
specifics.
credit. If anybody hung in through this whole thing, I want to give you some credit
Totally.
because honestly, like you can sit with some of the most powerful business minds in the world and the most like successful, adept people, and this conversation it'll either like they're yawning, like passing out, getting
Totally.
triggered and
It's
frustrated.
exhausting.
Like it hits on just such deep, such human issues, whether explicitly or not so explicitly, and it really requires a reorientation of how your mind understands like equality in relationships and productivity,
Yeah.
and like what it means to be successful. So like all of these things, like basically things that have a lot of influence over people's worldview, they have to be evaluated. They've got to be it's got to be softened, and that you've got to open up to other possibilities, and that can be challenging. So those of you that hung in through the whole thing, like you guys are awesome. Let us know how we can support you more, and stay in the communication with us.
And let us know where you are in this process. Are you a business leader that's looking at new paradigm options? Are you working, for a paycheck that is just not fulfilling anymore, and you want to be part of something in a different way? And if so, what role? So Dasha is saying here on my fan page, I want to work in such an organization. I'm a coach currently employed by the government and the Army that are wasting my potential and all I've learned in coaching. Is there a chance to, I can't see the rest of what you wrote, swipe left. It was probably too long of a comment for me to see. All right, Dasha, I'll read your comment on my page and respond to you there afterwards. So thank you. I think what you're expressing is what a lot of people are experiencing. They're experiencing that they're being wasted.
Yeah. No, I think it's really time, because there isn't really a place where people can come and feel safe and feel like they have the permission to, like, it's safe to pour their creativity into something without holding back some, because even the most gifted people don't want to get trapped by the circumstances, so they hold back in the, you know, the paper, like in these kind of in traditional organizations. So the world is dying for places where people can come together and just be like relentlessly creative in service of something bigger than themselves and get monetized and get resourced for it in a way that feels like fair. You know what I mean? And an analogy that I use quite a bit is like, if you think about a tribe, you know, there was the people that would go hunt and there was the people that didn't go hunt. But the person that went and hunted, when he got back with the deer, he gave the whole deer to the tribe. Like he's not like, save this much for me. Like he just gives them the whole deer and then he goes and cleans up and then they bring him food. And so it's like this full giving and this full receiving that's happening over and over again, instead of this like, every time we get something, we're to keep some for me and give what we can away like we do these days. And it feels so much different. And so I think creating a place where people can do that and people can be creative, like that's really what it's going to take to tip the scales, I think.
I can feel all of the parts of me that are super uncomfortable coming up. Because it does require a lot of shifts in consciousness for this to happen. And I can feel them. They're like, they need to happen here. And yeah, so thank you, Dasha, for being interested in that. Thank you, Eve, for wanting a much higher theoretical knowledge. And if you go ahead and give your name and email address at the link that I posted, I know that Paul will share the constitution that he's created, the Lay Leadership Constitution, so you can take a look at that as, you know, the possible foundation for the business and community that you're building as well. And to the rest of you that are doing this this work in the world, thank you. Thank you for being willing to make the shifts in yourself and in the way that we all work together so that we can truly create a world that works for everyone. And that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ali. This has been, I'm
Good
really
start.
enjoying this conversation. It's a good start for sure.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Great. I've never done anything. Oh, I can finish it over there. I've never done a live stream on my personal page before. That was exciting.
Nice.
Yeah. Bing. Great.
Oh, that was super cool. Here, check this out.
Oh. That's so cool.
So we have a live stream. We have this whole conversation live stream this way as well. So they could basically sit with their head right here.
Oh, that's so neat. Wow.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. That is so cool. Do people know how to do that?
We have 3 people watching still.
Oh, hello, 3 people. Oh, maybe I should be saying hello to you over here. I'm not sure where I'm looking. Aww. Oh, Kaya's calling. Hang on, babe. I don't know how to get my phone out.
Hold it. There you go.
Huh? Oh, you want me to come home? I could leave here pretty soon. Ah, got it. Okay. I love you. Bye. Kaya wants to have a party. I bought her wine. She doesn't want to have people over without me there. Super cute.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is cute. Sweet.
Okay.
That was awesome.
That was okay. That is great. So now I need to. Um, um, I do have to say that the network marketing model is super interesting. Like the business model of
Oh,
network
yeah.
marketing. Like it seems like it actually incorporates a lot of what we're talking about here. Not perfectly, of course, but it really, yeah, it's really,
Have
really.
you ever heard of BioCell?
Mm-mm. No.
My friend, Giovanna likes it, like, loves it.
BioCell, is that a network marketing company?
I forgot what the company is now, but yeah, it's a network marketing deal as well.
Huh. Yeah, this is around CBD oil.
Yeah, like, I think that as, like, if we can nail this, if I can nail the paperwork for this and
Yeah.
the training process to get, like, the first few people on board and monetized,
Yeah.
then as all the states open up with weed, like, we can just go start, like, labs and, like, you know, like, dispensaries and just put all the infrastructure in place
Mm-hmm.
and just like
Yes, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's
Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone.
Why did they do this
Taking
without
time out of your day to come on to our Find My Body.
Okay, this was the Zoom video with this guy Nate. So
encode.
yeah. It was really good. I'm gonna share it with you. You can't
I won't show
publicize
anybody
it
else.
yet,
I'll just like
but you might like it.
I'll look at it.
Yeah.
It'd be cool to see, like, get a little bit of their vibe. We got almost 800 views on that.
Yeah, it's great.
What legal entity are we talking about working with?
So we're talking about working with an existing legal entity that is currently called Eyes Wide Open, LLC. And we may end up creating an entirely new legal entity. We may end up restructuring that existing legal entity. We haven't decided that yet. What we envisioned doing, and I don't know if this is at all realistic, but what we envisioned doing is 4 2-hour sessions in July, in which we bring together the potential investors. And I'm using the word investors now instead of stakeholders because Roth helped me to see that that's what I need to do. And so when I'm talking investors, I'm talking using your terminology of time and money contributors. And so I envision that we would come together for 4 sessions throughout July. The first 2 of those sessions would be focused on education and strategy possibilities, and then the second 2 sessions would be focused on decision making. So that then Jason could use August to draft documents. And I'm kind of getting from your initial proposal that that's completely unrealistic, but I want to check in with you about that's true.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, tell us.
Okay, so
Yeah, it is.
okay. He said it was totally unrealistic. I need to make a really quick video.
Cool.
How do I do that?
On your computer?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
What do you mean, just like a...
Something that I can give to Ross to put on a page. How do I do that? Do I do it in photo booth? I guess I could do it in photo booth.
Sure. Yeah. I'm gonna have Max shut down the other recording.
Okay,
device.
great.
Go
I'm gonna
Max.